perception of the world and our culture. And I realized that in many ways was like a corporation, in terms of sustaining itself, and in terms of, if you're a part of this, you need to say the things that we tell you, and that's really kind of a thing that is very at odds when you're trying to make art, or trying to, those things that representing a corporation and trying to express things are very much at odds. And so I think my path has been both a step away from believing those things that I believe, but also, like Ryan, I don't know, it's really hard to talk about, because like Ryan said, I mean, this movie also, this is the first movie that Ryan's made that made me cry at the end of it. And I feel like I kind of watched this movie and I'm like, holy shit, is this heretic gonna make me find my faith again? Because I think it is a profoundly generous movie, and I love that you can identify that generosity in both Blanc and Judd, and that feels, while undefinable, also wonderful.
You talk about trading morality for power. That obviously rings a bell with this movie. What's the Josh Brolin character's name again? Wix. Okay. Is this, I mean, I can't help but watch this movie and see an allegory. I'm not going to ask you to get political, but like it feels allegorical. No idea what you're talking about. For what you're saying of that difference between faith and power. So is that the difference? I keep coming back to this. When you say no longer a believer, is when you say believer, are you talking about like allegiance to a center of power?
Well, when I say, also, everyone just do this if this is the most boring shit in the world. You want us to talk about, this is what I'm interested in. I find this fascinating, but I want to check in with you guys and make sure that.
Thank you.
This is the only Q&A that exists like this on this whole thing that Joe is leading it.
Looking over at Shannon from the Netflix team and making sure she's not.
You asked the wrong guy to moderate this.
No, so, I mean, again, getting back to, so I want to take a second and define, so, because I feel you're struggling with this. And I get it, though, I understand, it's a good question. I guess, so, when I kind of became no longer a Christian in my 20s, and when I fell away from the church, and when I lost my faith, it wasn't, I don't know, it is kind of hard to define, but it's not as if you're kind of like, first of all, I didn't see it in terms of shedding an illusion in order to then live in the real world. Faith was an all-encompassing lens through which I parsed the world. It was my narrative frame of reference for how the world worked. And when I no longer believed in the existence of God or in Christ as a spiritual entity that I was actually having a relationship with, what I had to do was find a new lens to see the world through. It's not like you're shedding a lens and then stepping onto the sunlight. You have to find another narrative framing device for the world. And that framing device brought much, how could it not? It brought a lot of the same foundation of the basic things that I valued from my time as a Christian. Many of which are just the red type parts of the New Testament, and there's a lot of that carries over, I think, even as a humanist into
red type parts. Is that
that's Jesus, the Jesus quotes.
The things he said.
Yeah. So, and so I think even as a humanist who's just trying to live a good life, there are things lots of that profoundly resonates into how I aspire, at least, to, in a flawed way, to try and live my life today. So I guess that's kind of how I think probably I can connect to people who do have faith and say, and that's largely what Father Judd was for me, was trying to put find those things that I still have a connection with today, and put them into a character who does still have faith.
I think that's part of why it so resonated with me as someone who doesn't have organized religion in my backstory of life. I do find a desire for something sacred or even holy that that maybe is missing in some secular.
Well, let me tell you about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Give us a moment.
It brings me a little bit to, there's part of what this movie does also is, I think, really sharply portrays secular culture, especially in terms of, like, I love the way that you portray what media is today. There's this YouTuber character, and that ties very much to politics and power and this cult of personality. And in a certain way, one could argue that this media culture we live in is, in a way, a dominant religion of our times. Maybe I'll just stop there. Does that ring true at all to either of you?
Yeah, but also though, I feel like there's a temptation to kind of identify directly with, I'll say the T word, directly with the Trump era and directly with what, and the reality is, and I don't know if you feel this, we were kids in the 80s in evangelical households. And during the Reagan years of the 80s, that's kind of, and it preceded this actually, but that's when we were experiencing then this kind of crucible fusion of Christianity into this, with this warped political perspective, and that's when that was really first kind of forming, and it has curdled and it has definitely absolutely curdled into something much worse than that, but it's a straight line from that to where we're at now. So I feel like it's not something that is very recent. It's something that I felt very much when I was when I was a kid in the church.
Yeah, and when I talk about the media of today, I don't intend it to mean just the right wing or the left wing, or I mean, there's a worship of follower count and views and stuff, or obsession with it anyway, that does have a lot of like normative. This is how you ought to be. This is what we ought to care about, I guess I'm curious to hear about where that's coming from you, and what connections you make between this movie that's on the one hand very much about, an ancient religion, and on the other hand about the dominant sort of lens through which our society views itself today.
Yeah, and for me it's another form of, I don't know, it's similar to with Wix's perspective in this of us against them, and build the fortress walls, and the notion of persecution, they're out to get us, and how that can be used as a tool to harness, to harness his flock. I would classify the media that you're describing, and that drive for attention, that drive for popularity is exactly the same thing. And it's similar to money, it's similar to power, it's kind of all those things kind of encapsulated in this one, slice. It's all the stuff that's antithetical to Christianity that is driving a lot of the loudest voices right now in the discourse.
Well, and I think if you feel like someone is out to get you, that unlocks an extreme, blank check to essentially do anything. I think like when you're talking about media, the scene that pops to my mind, it has nothing to do with media, but when Judd talks to Luis on the phone, and in that moment he's gotten caught up in someone else's game, and then this bell sort of rings true to his purpose. And I feel like that's all of us with social media, with media, with everything. It's so easy to get caught up in what's important to everyone else, what feels like matters, and then you have an interaction like that, and you remember, in Judd's case, he remembered, actually, my job is not to solve Blanc's thing here. My job is to serve these people, and
the siege thing is really, there was, real quick, I'll tell that, I went to, I was a youth group kid, I went to Young Life camp several times, I went to several Christian camps, and which there were a lot of great experiences at, but I remember being at one, and the culmination of the week was something called Night Chase. I think it was called Night Chase. And basically, it's a culmination. Meaning at the end of the week, the big events, the big like, ooh, we're going to do Night Chase at the end of the week. And Night Chase was this. All the campers started at one end of the campus, and the setup of the camp, and the setup was what we all knew was going to happen, has happened, and the government is hunting down Christians. Oh yeah, welcome to camp. And the whole thing was to get from, and all the counselors had flashlights, and the thing was to get from one end of the dark camp, they turned out the lights, all the way to the other without getting caught by the counselors.
You're how old in this picture?
I would have been probably in junior high.
33.
Yes. Yeah, probably in junior high. Okay. So what Nathan said just triggered that memory in me, and that's exactly that's the part of the cloud of things that were distilled into Wix, and that's a perfect example of what he's saying. That the notion of starting kids out with that perspective as a Christian, and just the notion of what you can then use that to, the us against them notion, how you can warp that into something that is antithetical to Christ, and I don't know. That's something that I think that.
It does seem, you say it's antithetical to Christ. That was my next question, was like, what do you think, what would Jesus say about our time right now?
Can I just say my favorite little moment that I clocked after, obviously in doing the music, I've watched the movie a million times, and I'm always seeing little things, and my favorite little moment is when Andrew Scott's character is sitting in the rectory, and he's trying to square the circle of realizing that his leader is fallen, but actually maybe we need an asshole to lead us, and he comes to this moment of realization. He's like, we need something.
The church doesn't need some pussy.
Yeah, we need someone to fight with us. We don't need a pussy. And over his shoulder is
Who's
Jesus.
Lie down and take it?
Yeah, we don't need a pussy who's gonna lie down and take it. We need someone to fight for us. And over his shoulder is a painting of Jesus on the cross. and I just was texting Ryan, this is so good.
My mind also goes to just the other day, an article came out about you, and I wasn't expecting it, but the headline was something along the lines of Rian Johnson rails against AI, and talks about because there is some contingent of AI enthusiasts that I think do have a religious fervor about it, that talk about it in terms of this thing is going to be like a god. That's not everybody, but there is a significant chunk of the people that are building this technology. What do you think of that?
Aren't you guys glad you're here tonight?
I think they are desperately waiting on the side. I'm going to do a quick 20 minutes on AI. I'm going to get Guillermo on speakerphone. We're going to get into this. I think I would, first of all, be much. And by the way, anyone look up on I mostly see them on Instagram, but Joe is one of the most articulate people that I know about this topic, and has been speaking to politicians and speaking to business leaders, and has been really, really putting your neck out there in a way that is in a way that's articulate and is not just raging, but is incredibly intelligent. So, and I feel utterly unqualified to speak beyond that. I mean, my thing is just, I feel like it's funny. I just, I've been reading there's this author, William Gaddis, and he wrote, I've been reading some of the books he wrote in the 70s, obviously pre-AI, but he was obsessed with the notion of player pianos, the roll kind of pianos that way. And he wrote about these in the context of this is a step in the conduit of corporations being able to do exactly what they want to do, which is to take the messy artist out of the equation. He talks about a German, I'm not going to remember the name, a German biologist, anatomist from, I think from the 17th century, who, and this is true, he would dissect cadavers. He would take out their windpipes and kind of their throat boxes, and then he would create these bellows to push air through them to create the sound of singing, with his theory being that they could do this with famous opera stars who have died, and opera companies would be able to use that and would not have to hire playback. Ultimately, all of this grotesque shit is what I see at the heart of AI. I see it as a kill the piano player. I understand why corporations are excited about this. I understand why they want to take these messy artists out of the equation. But also, fuck that shit. That's gross.
I think I have one more. To me, something where I find maybe a sanctity or a connection with something greater than myself, and I think I've had this in common with both of you, is in the creative process, art and creativity. Do you see something in common between religion or spirituality or faith and being an artist or being a filmmaker, being a musician? Do those dots ever connect for you guys?
Yeah, but it doesn't. I mean, I feel like I don't know. Yes, but for example, like, I've had a few people during the course of talking about this movie ask me, well, did filmmaking replace faith for you? And I wouldn't put it like that, because I think that the reality is faith is an all-encompassing, like I said, lens through which you parse the world's entire system of belief. Filmmaking is, I think filmmaking is to a bigger worldview, is like prayer. Filmmaking is a method and a process by which you excavate things inside of you and offer them up and connect with bigger things, and connect with bigger things in terms of an audience, and that connects us all sitting watching it. That's what art is. But it's not the thing itself. And so I think that's the distinction. I think if you just live inside filmmaking, live inside movies, then the reality is that all has to draw from a well. And so, and that well being, being life. Jesus, that sounded grand. I apologize. Sorry.
I think something I hold dear from my upbringing and my study is the idea of this narrative of God as a creator. And I have a whole lot of pictures of God as other things that I grew up with, but to answer your question specifically, personally, that feels like if that is true, if there is God as a creator, I feel that represented in all of us, in ourselves. To touch briefly on this concept of AI, the thing that I love so much about movie making is getting to collaboratively create with other people. And I think that spark, the idea that spark was maybe put inside of us and then maybe we pass that down to our children, that feels really, really wonderful and just a lovely invitation for us to get to experience with the people that we get to collaborate with.
Can I say this was either the best or the worst Q&A?